Hello my friends, in today's video we will take a look at Viltrox AF 13mm F1.4 FX. The selection of third-party lenses for Fujifilm X mount keeps growing, and Viltrox is becoming one of the most important manufacturers of X mount lenses. There aren't many options for 20mm equivalent lenses for the X mount, so 13mm Viltrox might be a very welcome addition. In this video we will take a look at the performance of this lens in combination with Fujifilm X-T4, and I will try to help you decide whether you should consider getting one. By today's standards, 19.5 or basically 20mm isn't an extremely wide focal length. In comparison to 14 or 16mm focal length, it puts much less emphasis on the foreground. I think that it is a good compromise between the immersion associated with ultra-wide focal length and all-round usability. It is a very useful focal length for landscape, cities, and architecture. At f1.4 it is also very suitable for the low light. It is 90mm long and it weighs 420 grams, which is in my opinion adequate for this kind of focal length and aperture. It is a good match for the X-T4, which has pretty small grip, but the whole combination is not too front heavy. The build quality is fantastic. The outer construction is completely metal, including the focusing ring. It feels solid and I can definitely say premium. It certainly punches above the price point in this regard. The mount is metal as well. As you can see, there is also a USB-C port for firmware updates, which is very convenient. It has some degree of weather sealing, which is very nice at this price point. Unfortunately, there is no gasket around the mount. It has a 67mm filter thread, which is great because it is a very popular size, used for example on Fujifilm 16mm F1.4. I have used this lens with a freewheel variable ND filter, which worked great without any vignetting whatsoever. This lens comes with a very high quality metal lens hood. It attaches with a solid click. The length of this lens hood is typical for a 20mm lens. Unless I am using a filter, I keep the lens hood attached all the time to protect the front element. Regarding the control elements, there is the focusing ring and aperture ring. The focusing ring is sufficiently large. It uses focus-by-wire system, so it is completely smooth, but the resistance is very well judged. Manual focusing with this lens is actually very good. I was able to make these repeated focus pulls with no issues at all. The aperture ring finally has clicks at 1/3 of a stop increments. The ring is very tactile and it has a nice amount of resistance, so it is very pleasant to use. If you prefer to change aperture in camera, you can simply select the A position and use command dial. So how about the optical qualities? I have tested this lens with a 26MP sensor in Fujifilm X-T4. This sensor is very demanding when it comes to the optical qualities of the lenses, so let's see how it works together. The central sharpness is very good right from f1.4. The contrast is pretty good, but there is a room for improvement. There is a moderate increase of contrast at f2. We will get similar increase from f2 to f2.8, where the overall image quality is basically perfect. The sharpness is about the same at f4, f5.6 and f8. There is a pretty significant amount of diffraction at f11. The corner sharpness at f1.4 is not bad, but there is a room for improvement. It gradually improves at f2 and f2.8, where we can see very solid image quality. The image quality in the corners at f4, f5.6 and f8 is excellent. Again, there is visible decrease of contrast at f11. Overall, this is actually one of the best X-mount lenses that I have ever tested on this scene. This kind of lens with f1.4 aperture isn't particularly easy to make, so heads off to the Viltrox. The profile corrections are baked into the RAWs, which is completely fine by me. There are no apparent signs of vignetting or distortion, so I don't really have any motivation to investigate how much it relies on profile corrections. The real-world images are just as impressive. The contrast is very good and the color rendition is very pleasant in combination with Fujifilm's color science, so it just takes very nice pictures. The level of chromatic aberration is also very low, so I don't really have any complaints regarding the image quality. The minimum focus is 22 cm, which translates to 0.1 times magnification. That is enough for getting an interesting close-up angles for smaller objects, but not enough for semi-macro use. On the plus side, the image quality at the minimum focus distance is very solid even with wide open aperture. The bokeh is actually quite pleasant. It has 9 aperture blades, and at f1.4 you can achieve subject separation even at this kind of angle. The rendition of bokeh is very smooth and even the outlines aren't really harsh, so that is a pleasant surprise with this type of lens. As you might know, the autofocus performance with Fujifilm cameras depends a lot on the lenses. With 13mm Viltrox, it is the best that it can be at the moment. In the stills mode, it is very fast and very accurate. I haven't noticed any issues even in difficult backlit situations. All of the smart features such as eye autofocus work as well. In video, it is among the best focusing lenses with the X-T4. It works very well in reasonable situations. In silly or very difficult situations such as this one, you might still occasionally see that pause during the focusing, but it is much less frequent and less disturbing than with most other lenses. Continuous autofocus is definitely usable with this combination. Importantly, the autofocus motor is completely silent, so it won't be picked up by the in-camera microphone or by the shotgun microphone. That is a huge advantage even in comparison to some of the latest Fujifilm lenses. The amount of focus breathing is remarkably low, which means that the size of the objects in the frame will not change as you are zooming in and out. It is barely visible, which is very impressive for this type of lens. 13mm f1.4 is not stabilized, but the in-body image stabilization in Fujifilm X-T4 is more than sufficient at this focal length. 20mm equivalent is generally easy to stabilize. Static shots look basically like on a tripod, pointing the camera around is also completely fine, so I don't miss the optical image stabilization in this case at all. Last but definitely not least, 13mm Viltrox is an excellent value. It costs less than half of the price of Fujifilm first-party f1.4 wide-angle primes. Together with other Viltrox lenses, such as 23mm f1.4, it makes the whole X-mount an interesting proposition for more price-conscious buyers, which is great for the whole system. My review of 23mm f1.4 will also be linked in the description. To sum up, Viltrox AF 13mm f1.4 XF is one of my most favorite lenses for Fujifilm X-mount. 20mm full-frame equivalent is in my opinion very interesting and maybe slightly underrated focal length, so it is great that there is a budget-friendly option for the X-mount. The image quality is excellent, it is one of the sharpest X-mount lenses that I have ever tested on my scene. Especially if you stop down to about f2.8, you will get excellent sharpness and contrast across the frame. The build quality is well above the price category. The autofocus is also as good as it can be in combination with the X-T4 at the moment. Also worth mentioning are the very tactile aperture ring, very smooth focusing ring, and basically no focus breathing. Basically the only negative of this lens is that there is no weather sealing gasket around the mount, despite that it has some degree of weather sealing. Viltrox AF 13mm f1.4 for the X-mount is in my opinion one of the best lenses in the system. It offers interesting focal length and excellent performance at a very reasonable price, so I can very highly recommend it. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you have found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.